Hundreds of world leaders. The Copenhagen Climate Conference has closed. Both President Obama and the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon have admitted that the deal is not all that it should be. Delegates have voted simply to take note of a climate accord reached between the United States and other major economies with no mention of a legally binding treaty. Well, our environment correspondent David Shukman has this report from Copenhagen.
It's taken all night, but eventually most delegates edged towards accepting the deal brokered by America. In the past 48 hours, the UN Secretary-General has managed just 2 hours sleep.
It will take more than this to definitively tackle climate change, but it is a step in the right direction.
Yesterday, President Obama won agreement from a handful of key countries, but others objected. The island nation of Tuvalu fears vanishing beneath the sea.
Mr. President, I regret to inform you that Tuvalu cannot accept this document. Thank you.
Climate Change Secretary Ed Miliband worked through the night to try to salvage things.
It's not the final word at all. I think it is the end of the beginning, and it marks a real sense that developing and developed countries, despite their constraints, want to tackle the problem.
That's still disappointing.
It is disappointing not to have got the legally binding treaty, and I think that was always going to be the case, and it's disappointing not to have got the global goal.
Compared to the original aim for this event, getting a new treaty on global warming, this falls a long way short. It also fails to tackle what climate scientists believe is the key issue, getting greenhouse gases to fall within 10 years. As the clear-up begins, the questions remain: what exactly comes next, and ultimately, how serious is the world about tackling climate change? David Shukman, BBC News, Copenhagen.
Well, joined now by the leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas, who can give her thoughts. We heard Ed Miliband saying there, Caroline Lucas, that it was disappointing. Does that go far enough, do you think?
I think it was a complete disaster, to be honest. We've been waiting for this meeting, preparing for it. For years and years, we've known this was going to be the big moment when we had to put in place an ambitious, legally binding agreement that was going to have good, strong targets for the emission cuts that needed to have serious money on the table, that was going to have equity, justice based at the heart of it. In other words, understanding that richer countries are overwhelmingly responsible for climate change, therefore they have the biggest capacity and responsibility to do something about it. And what have we got? We've got an empty accord with no legally binding framework, no targets, no money that's absolutely guaranteed to be over and above existing aid budgets. It's deeply, deeply disappointing.
From your point of view, what do you think went wrong?
I think there wasn't enough preparation in advance. I think there wasn't enough willingness of countries to go the extra mile, to put a proposal on the table. I wish very strongly that the EU, for example, had been prepared to put a 30% cut on the table very early on, instead of keeping it in their back pocket, saying, well, they'll do it if everybody else does. You know, it needed to have some real political leadership to move this forward. And I'm afraid what we've seen is a lot of people trying to save face rather than trying to save the planet.
Yeah, it was interesting listening, though, to John Prescott earlier. We had him on giving his thoughts, and he was talking about Kyoto, which he had experiences of, saying, come on, you know, just like Kyoto, these things, it's a first stage, and the detail gets thrashed out later. The legally binding stuff is done later. This is a starting point, and we should never expect to come out with something that's signed, sealed, delivered.
Well, that would be a more credible position if we actually had a fixed date when we were going to pick up these talks again. You know, I wouldn't have a problem with postponing for a couple of months. We've been waiting for years. Another couple of months won't matter. But we didn't even have a set date when everyone agrees to reconvene. And so there's a real worry that it's going to get kicked into the long grass. That's why I think it's so important that there's a really strong message from civil society, from ordinary people, you know, to say that they're not done with this agreement. We have to do an awful lot more, keep the pressure up on the politicians, and recognise, frankly, that you know, the kinds of measures that we need in industrialised countries to deal with climate change are measures which, in any case, will make our lives better off. This isn't about sacrifice. It's about things that are good for jobs, good for the economy, as well as being good for the environment.
You were mentioning what happens next. Many people, though, saying, well, looking forward to 2010, there's going to be a climate summit in Germany, people talking about Mexico. So there are some staging posts that could prove useful to be made into a deadline.
Yes, I mean, it's not the end of the road by any means. We need to keep up the pressure. There are moments, as you say, in Germany and Mexico when it can be picked up. I just think it was desperately disappointing that there wasn't an agreement put into the final treaty. I know it was in some of the earlier documents, but in the final document, we don't have that fixed date when it's going to be picked up again. And so, my message is we just absolutely have to keep the pressure on, because this is urgent. Again, John Prescott's line about saying, don't worry, we can sort this out, would be fine if we had forever to sort it out, but the scientists are telling us we have literally between 5 and 8 years to get emissions to peak and then to start to come down. The longer we talk, the hotter the planet gets, the more risk there is to really literally everybody on the planet.
OK, Caroline Lucas from the Green Party, thanks very much. Now it's 17 minutes past 5. Let's just remind